Hey little ones, today I've got a couple of scary videos for you. If you like the content, don't forget to subscribe and like. Now then, get comfortable and enjoy. Why are you so pale? Yeah, God, I bet. I look like a ghost. I feel as if they drained 3 liters of blood out of me. What? No, not a scratch. I'm sorry, I got carried away. I'm just... What would be the right word? Shaken. A strange feeling. I've seen it all during my service. I thought that if it ever was my turn to experience something like this, it would hardly be anything new. But this is another level of fucking madness. I feel like I'm floating above my own body. Just cut the thread and I'll fly away. Have you seen the crimes? Don't you dare. Don't look at the photos. Don't even touch the folder. You'll thank me later. My knees won't stop shaking. Why are you clutching your coffee like that? I'm making the table wobble. Yeah, give me a second. Let me move the chair back. There, much better. We need to start officially. Hop. Can you confirm for the record that you waive your right to an attorney? No, I still don't need an attorney. I mean, yes, I waive that legal right. I'm sorry, and I am in my right mind, as much as is possible for me. Are you sure? Yes. Put it in the record. Retired Detective Hobson Millgate has waived his right to an attorney. I won't need an attorney once the district attorney stops vomiting and decides if this is worth making public. They won't show this to a jury. Are you ready to start? No, but I'm going to talk anyway. What brought you to the crime scene that night? Would you believe me if I told you that right before that, I was going to go fishing? Never mind. Wait. I think I'm having trouble sorting out my thoughts. I've never sat on this side of the interrogation table. I think it all started with a reporter named Bamer. She contacted me a week ago by mail, claiming she had new information about the Driscoll murders. I was the lead investigator. The case had been unsolved for 20 years. A cold case. To be honest, at first, I thought it was all a hoax. You know how these things go. Most of the time they don't even mean any harm. Everyone thinks they know something that will help solve the case in a heartbeat. Constructing theories is easy when you don't have to test them against the evidence. The Driscoll murder was a very high-profile story in our area. A lot of interest, a ton of press. Over the years, I must have listened to a couple hundred bullshit theories. When I retired, I passed the investigation on to Detective Carroll. But I didn't want to bother him. I know he's busy with gang stuff right now. I decided to check out the lead myself, just out of courtesy. I didn't expect anything to come of it. I met her for lunch at the Perrieri cafeteria. A pretty blonde. She looked professional, so she didn't fit the typical profile of a scammer or a conspiracy theorist. Not that I believe much in those profiles anyway. She could have easily turned out to be one of those creepy girls who get off on death. My God. I've had to deal with women like that too. I still thought she was pulling my leg. Or that maybe she had been fooled herself. But she was carrying a folder that looked real. It contained something like a confession. Well, from Driscoll. Though he wasn't the killer. You know, I wish he had been. It would have been much better for everyone. Can you give us some background on the Driscoll case? Let's see. Let me think. This was 20 years ago. To think that so much time has passed. 20 fucking years. That's a terribly long time to... Don't move. Hop, thank you. The Driscolls, a family of 6, lived on the outskirts. Upper middle class. The father was a lawyer. The mother had a small business of her own selling pottery from home. 4 children, all school-aged, in elementary and middle school. Good kids, excellent students, no criminal record. The oldest son was caught once at school with marijuana, but that was it. The typical dirty laundry you uncover if you look at people too closely. They disappeared on October 13th, 1994. Not a trace of the bodies, a mystery, compounded by the fact that it all happened right before Halloween. That's probably why the press went so wild. They still feature them on those unsolved mystery shows. An entire family gone and nobody saw a thing. Nobody knew where they had gone. A neighbor complained about the noise. That's how we got involved. They had an alarm and he thought it might be a burglar or something. We sent a patrol car since no one answered. When knocking on the door, the patrolman went in. In the youngest daughter's bedroom, there were clear signs of a struggle. The bed was overturned, the sheets bunched up, and the alarm turned out to be a carbon monoxide detector. We found a high concentration of carbon monoxide in the fabric of all the quilts, except for the youngest daughter's. If it hadn't been for the detector, it wouldn't have even occurred to us to check. The neighbor said the detector had been beeping for more than 24 hours. And during all that time, he couldn't locate anyone. We also found several aluminum cylinders and hoses in a dumpster a couple of blocks away. At the time, we assumed the Driscolls had been put to sleep with gas and moved to another location, except of course for the daughter, who woke up at the last moment and put up a fight. The investigation hit a dead end. Of course, the first thing we thought was that the father had done it. We checked, but he had no motive nor any leads. The same with the mother. The relatives also turned out to be clean. The father had some clients who might have had a motive, but not the opportunity. He was a divorce lawyer, but he didn't handle cases of people who could make an entire family disappear without a trace. 3 blocks away lived a chemistry teacher. We investigated him for a while regarding the cylinders, but he turned out to have an alibi. Same with the dentist who lived nearby. The wife had had some kind of online flirtation with a guy from England, but nothing serious. Besides, he wasn't even in the country when the murders occurred. In the end, reluctantly, we were left with the version of a random killer. Those bastards are impossible to catch when there's no pattern. We must have invested tens of thousands of hours of work into this case, chasing ghosts, and all for nothing. Eventually, we managed to track the cylinders. They had been stolen from a laboratory 10 miles from here. There were no camera recordings, no clues about the thief. 6 months later, since there were no new attacks, the case became a cold case file. The Driscolls were put to sleep and kidnapped. As I already said, the bodies were never found. Who could say for sure they hadn't run away? Anyway, I'd prefer to tell this only once. What can you tell us about how that confession came into Miss Baymer's hands? She had been following the case for several years, both personally and as a reporter. As I said, it fueled many people's imaginations. Even seemingly normal people thought it could have been aliens, ghosts, or demons. Miss Baymer published a retrospective article on these murders for the 20th anniversary. This triggered another wave of interest. This happened from time to time. As usual, I refused to comment, citing the lack of new evidence. However, I remembered she had asked me for a statement, which is why I agreed to meet her for lunch. After the article was published, Miss Baymer claimed she had been sent a folder. She wanted me to confirm its authenticity. The most important part of that folder was the confession. I assured Miss Baymer that these kinds of forgeries weren't rare, especially in old cases like this, and that I personally had heard 24 confessions to the Driscoll murder, but she insisted. Once I realized she wasn't trying to pull my leg and that she wasn't the type to gloat about murder, I agreed to the meeting. She said the confession had been mailed to her in the very same envelope she showed me during lunch. Can you describe the contents? Old newspaper clippings describing the progress of my investigation. They were yellowed. Naturally, so I assumed they came from the criminal's trophy album. There were also 6 supposedly of the Driscoll family members, as well as some other images of the place where they were taken. Look, my hands won't stop shaking. Look, as hard as I try, I just can't keep them still. I'll have to ask the medic for a sedative when I'm done with the statement. Otherwise, I don't think I'll be able to sleep. No, I'm fine for now. I don't want anything interfering with my memories while you're recording. It's just that carrying this in my head is like... I'm sorry, I'm going to focus. In the photographs, of course, was the Driscoll family. At the time, I didn't know it. They were preserved and could have been anyone. It was very difficult to distinguish facial features. However, considering how meticulously prepared the folder was, I decided it deserved a more thorough check. As for the confession letter itself, it was short. It contained an address. The first thing I noticed. I couldn't find that address online, which meant it must be old. The letter said, "Stop publishing lies. I haven't killed anyone. It just took time to get them ready for breakfast." There were no signatures. I just remembered something. Damn it! We were sent a breakfast menu a month after the disappearance. Someone had circled the photo of some pancakes in red. The note said, "They are not dead. They are getting ready for breakfast." We filed it in the junk leads folder. Oh my God. Detective Milgate, do you need time? Oh my God. How was I to know? We tried to track that menu. We could never figure out where it came from. None of the local places. All identifying information had been cut out. I don't know what else we could have done back then. Merciful God. Why did you decide to personally check the address indicated in the letter? I'm sorry. I wanted to make sure it wasn't a forgery. I still wasn't sure. I had been receiving fake evidence for 20 years. I suppose this case had taken hold of my imagination too. I always thought that one day I would remember something I had overlooked and solve the whole thing. It was unbelievable that someone would just drop the answer in my lap. I needed to see it with my own eyes. Miss Bamer located the place through municipal records, but neither she nor I were sure it was still standing. It was an abandoned industrial building. The last time it had an active mailing address was 50 years ago. It could have collapsed since then. Who knows? I suppose I also wanted to solve it myself. It didn't matter that the answer had fallen from the sky. This case had weighed on me for 20 years. Miss Bamer and I agreed to meet there the following morning. Can you describe the skidis? Yes, it was an industrial building. As I said, about 120 feet long and maybe 45 feet wide, a wooden structure. And at first, its condition seemed to match that of the neighboring buildings. However, I noticed that the facade had been patched recently in several places. A closer inspection also showed that the entrance was secured with chains and a padlock. From what I understand, it used to be a tinsmith shop. At least, I'm sorry, do you have a trash can? I think I'm going to throw up. Thank you. I'm sorry. I thought I had nothing left inside. No, I want to finish with this, and then I'll need the sedative. I caught a smell from inside the building, very faint. I decided that was enough probable cause for a search. Not that I needed it. I'm a civilian. But the smell of a corpse is impossible to forget. I wish they had only smelled like that. I still haven't forgotten how to pick locks. So I went in. You know, I really wished they were corpses. I really, really wished it was a serial killer. Really. Please tell me you believe me. I believe you. Can you describe what was inside the building? I'm trying not to lose my train of thought. Really, I'm trying. I'm sorry. It's just that after this, I'd like to sleep for a very long time. The medic is here. The sedative is ready. Praise God. The warehouse turned out to be less abandoned than we initially thought. Inside, there was a hallway with 6 rooms. The construction was old, but you could tell that hallway and those rooms were more recent than the rest of the building. The walls between the rooms were soundproofed. No windows to the outside or doors between the rooms themselves. The only entrance was from the hallway. At that point, I tried to force Miss Bamer to leave. You see, inside the smell was stronger. You could feel that smell, like sand getting into your nose, like a fine dust settling on your skin. In the rooms, there were presses, custom-made 4x8 foot hydraulic presses. At first, I couldn't understand what that was because they loomed over something resembling hospital beds. In each room, there were IV drips and other medical equipment. Sure, that's how he kept them alive for so long. I feel like my vision is getting blurry. Do you want to take a break? Starting this story over is even worse than finishing it. Then, please describe your next actions. The building was obviously an active crime scene. By then, I had no doubts. I was in the lair of someone I considered a serial killer. I tried several times to tell Miss Bamer to leave. She refused, stating it wouldn't be right to leave me alone. I didn't have time to argue with her. I had to make a choice. Either act alone in the impossible and incredible case that the family was still alive and perhaps in danger, or leave and call for backup. I told my wife where I was going, so I knew that if the worst happened, they would notice my absence and report it to the proper authorities. Neither my cell phone nor hers had reception. I'm sorry, I got distracted again. And then I heard not even a sigh. Something like a sigh, but not quite. I don't want to describe it in more detail. There was a sound, it forced me to keep going. I had to act. That was the only thing that mattered. At the far end of the warehouse, there was a staircase leading down to the basement. I ordered Miss Bamer to stay upstairs and drew my service revolver. I was also carrying a flashlight. I turned it on as I went down. The basement had been dug out by hand. Maybe it was dug out by all those listed as missing. I don't know. The floor was dirt, and a tunnel started from there, so long it required support props at regular intervals. When my flashlight first illuminated that pile, I wish they had been dead. I wish it had been a serial killer. Please, take your time. When I came to, my first thought was, thank goodness, they're all dead. Fuck, I'm 64 years old. I'm no longer that young man who can forget everything. When you're young, you have that sense of being invulnerable and that you're never going to die. I don't have that protection anymore. Look at me. Here I am crying when that was done to them. It's my fault. I should have found them, saved them somehow. I'm sorry, Hop, I'm forced to ask you. Can you describe what you saw? Yes, I can. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Fuck. I still don't understand it. It was a pile, maybe 2 feet thick. Judging by the stench and the color, it was clearly flesh. I thought maybe he had cut them into pieces and piled them up, and that would have been more than enough. The first thing that made me understand the truth was an eyeball. At the top of the pile was a perfectly round eyeball, in the middle of a socket, stretched to the size of a saucer. And then I understood that what I was looking at was 20 fucking years of torture. Basically, he kept the entire Driscoll family under those presses for 20 years, keeping them alive through IV drips, increasing the pressure so slowly that their bodies had time to adapt until they were flattened into a pancake. He crushed them approximately 0.5 centimeter each year for 20 years. Then he took them out when they were already too broken and helpless to move without the slightest chance of recovery, and piled them on top of each other. I have no idea what for, nor do I want to know. I kept thinking, thank goodness they're all dead. When the one on top started to gasp again, what did they say? At first, nothing. He couldn't speak without help. It must have been Avery Driscoll. Not that I could determine the sex or age, but the hair, where he had any left, was blonde. The head was a mass of scars. I think the son of a bitch who did this probably removed parts of their skulls. Otherwise, I can't imagine how he got that flat shape on the heads. Not as flat as the rest of the bodies, but flat. Damn it, God knows how his brain withstood it. Their lips were pierced by their teeth, which had broken through the skin, probably after the presses crushed their noses. Avery was 14 years old when he disappeared. I've stopped shaking. Fuck, how strangely our bodies are made. And what else? There was an apparatus, a kind of pump. I followed the hose with the flashlight and understood that every single person in that pile was connected to that pump. Do you understand? I don't think they could breathe on their own. Not anymore. There simply wasn't any volume left for their lungs to expand. A kind of hole had been made in the chest of each one of them. On the pump there was a switch. I don't know why I flipped it. I was panicking. I wanted to do something. Maybe a stupid part of my brain thought that if I turned it on, they would inflate and be fine. I flipped it. It increased the air supply to the top hose. I heard the pump working harder, and it was right then that Avery Driscoll started screaming. He was begging me to kill him. He said other things too. His words didn't make much sense. He kept screaming. The doom of error, over and over again, and something about the family. I didn't understand. He was in pain. I hope he had gone crazy years before. Oh my God, that's exactly what I thought. I didn't know what to do. He wouldn't stop screaming. I think he was convinced I was his torturer, looking closely at his eye. I saw it was composed almost entirely of white scar tissue. He was blind as a mole. You know, I once spoke with burn survivors. They told me that, over time, they were able to find meaning and purpose in life again. I don't know how any member of the Driscoll family could have done that. I identified myself, said I was a detective, said I was there to help. I repeated it over and over, knowing full well that nothing and no one in the world could help them anymore. Miss Bamer came running down. She was drawn by the sound. Before seeing the pile, she said it was me who had screamed, and that she came to help, but I don't remember screaming. Be that as it may, she came, then she saw the pile and screamed herself. But I was focused on Avery Driscoll. He could hear. For a few moments, he regained clarity. It was almost impossible to understand what he was saying. But I won't forget it for the rest of my life. Please kill me. It hurts. I don't want to be a monster. Please, kill me and tell my family I died a long time ago. I don't know if they're still looking for me. Don't let them know what I've become. Please, kill me. He could still cry, and he did, though his tear ducts were too deformed for it to show. I had to use force to make Miss Bamer leave. It's the only thing I regret in this case, more than not solving it 20 years ago, not just for her own sake, but because of what she did next. I don't think she could have caused them more harm, even if she had tried. She took away the last comfort each one of them had in that pile. Do you understand? They hadn't been able to speak to each other in 20 years, she said. Is that all of them? Yes, it's the whole Driscoll family. They're all in there, alive, the whole family, for 20 years. Each member of the Driscoll family didn't suspect that the other prisoners were the rest of their family. Every single one of them clung to the hope that their relatives were okay. All of them dreamed that someone out there, in freedom, loved them and wasn't suffering. Do you know what 6 people who have been tortured for 20 years and then crushed to a thickness of 4 inches to be piled on top of each other sound like? When they scream, it sounds as if the very gates of hell were creaking open. I think that's enough. Detective Milgate, not yet. It was my mistake. I should have dug deeper, checked that lead. maybe that's what they meant when they screamed. The doom of error. It was my mistake, and therefore my responsibility. I shot them. Mercy is a heavy thing, but I owed it to them. I was the one who couldn't save them. One bullet was enough to go through them all. But I emptied the whole revolver to make sure they wouldn't suffer anymore, to grant them that final rest. It was the only kindness I could offer them. After that, we left and called for backup. Neither Miss Bamer nor I wanted to stay with the bodies. I decided not to go down to the basement with the forensics team. I asked if I could give a statement and leave. And after one of them saw what I saw, they agreed. Can I take the sedative now? Yes, of course. Thank you. Call the medic, I'll roll up my sleeve. My wife has diabetes, so I'm used to this. Oh, and please, do the same favor for Miss Bamer. After all this, I think she was worse off than me. The poor thing couldn't even cry or vomit. Of course, you know where she is now. She told the person in charge at the crime scene that she was going home, but we can't contact her. Have you tried checking at the newspaper? Which one? The Daily World. Are you sure? There is no one with the last name Bamer on the staff of the Daily World. My life is a constant measurement of pain. It flows and ebbs in my nerves as if drawn by the phases of a moon I cannot see. All my life I have searched for that moon, that cause of my suffering. But it remained hidden in the clouds of mystery. I spent most of my time within the whitewashed walls of hospitals, where the sharp smell of antiseptic was a cruel blow to my senses. You would expect that. After so many hours of observation and analysis, the doctors and nurses would find a way to fix me. Unfortunately, they couldn't see the cause either. Just like me, week after week, my parents would lay me on a rigid hospital bed, and the doctors would observe me as if I was suspended in a cage of splintered glass. They feared moving me, but they also feared not touching me. I couldn't be fixed. I had a bitter moon. As a child, I had an inexplicable love for mirrors. I don't know why, but it always seemed to me that when I looked in the mirror, I wasn't looking at myself. The person in the reflection looked like me. Yes, but there was a disconnect. It didn't feel like me. It felt like a friend. It might have alarmed someone else. For me, it was a blessing. In my hospital room, the standard one that, by the time I was 8, they almost always kept especially for me. A mirror hung opposite the bed. In it, I saw my pale reflection. The color would drain from my skin until I was as white as the walls guarding me. The girl in the mirror, who wasn't entirely me, became my best friend. It's sad, yes, but not for the reason you might think. Over the years, my pain proved to be multifaceted, manifesting in almost every imaginable way. When I was 10 years old, I fell to the ground, screaming in the park. My mother thought I had broken my arm. That's how tightly I was pressing it against my chest. The X-rays at the hospital showed it was perfectly fine, but I spent several more hours howling in pain. They tried giving me morphine, which I always hated because it made me nauseous. It had no effect. I stayed on the gurney, and while my mother tried to hold back her tears, I had to stay in the hospital for a week before the blinding pain subsided to a dull hum and I could return to my life. One night, when my mother thought I was asleep, I heard her arguing quietly about something with my father. There was anxiety in her voice. I was afraid they wanted to get rid of me because I was a very troublesome child. When I was 11, it was my back. The sensation was as if my flesh were being torn wide open, exposing the muscles, while the sharp tears in the skin licked my nerves with fire. I didn't tell my parents anything about this. I stayed in bed all day, even though it was summer and I wanted to go outside to make sure the sun was still in its place. I thought if I told them, and they had to take me to the hospital again, They would hand me over to an orphanage. I don't know why I decided that, so I just lay face down, crying and wishing I were a normal little girl. The next day the pain was still there, but it became tolerable, and my parents never had to find out. When I was 12, a toothache sent me back to the hospital. This time, I couldn't hide it from my parents. It felt as if my teeth were being ripped out by the roots without anesthesia. The doctors poked at my gums and palate trying to ease the pain, but it was constant, like the bright spark of a red-hot wire stretched across my whole mouth. Sometimes I felt like a monster. It seemed as if all my pain were trying to escape from me, burning and mutilating my body in the process. Sometimes I felt like an abandoned science experiment left to rot in the suburbs of America, which even the best medicine in the developed world was unable to rein in. But most of the time, I put myself in the shoes of a freak who cried at night when her parents weren't looking and who was friends with mirrors. Maybe that's why, in my best dreams, I wasn't so strange. My greatest wish had always been to be normal. The girl in the mirror was my best friend, but not the only one. It's true that a hospital kid found it hard to make friends at school. Everyone knew I was sick, that I was fragile, different, and they feared that if they touched me, I would break into pieces and they wouldn't be able to put me back together. For the most part, the other school children kept away from me. But there were always the nurses. There was Emma. She used to give me my shots and draw my blood. There was Chrissy. She would come sit with me during her breaks and read me stories if my parents couldn't stay. And there was Seamus. He once bought me a stuffed unicorn because I had forgotten my favorite toy at home. When my parents rushed me here, then there were the doctors. Two physicians I saw very often, Dr. Cadell and Dr. Lewis. They were as permanent residents of the hospital as I was, and soon they were assigned to manage my unceasing case and monitor me closely. I quickly grew fond of both of them, and they even allowed me to call them by their first names. Dr. Cadell became Adam, and Dr. Lewis became Peter. Adam was a tall, sturdy man with cheeks that were always rosy and an expressive laugh. They used to call him when I was inconsolable with pain because his way of speaking calmed me like nothing else. When I was falling to pieces, they called him because he knew how to keep me whole. Peter was a bit intimidating for a pediatrician, a true giant with a thick beard, but he was kind, charming, and kept his best jokes just for me, knowing I loved them. Sometimes I caught a strange look from him directed at me. He seemed intrigued, and I suppose I really was intriguing with this causeless pain that wouldn't yield to medication. I didn't mind his interest. It was much easier to bear than the pity I was used to seeing from the new staff. He continued to manage my case, even after I grew too old for his care. He seemed very determined to cure me. These people became my family and friends, so I suppose my illness had its bright side too. It's just that sometimes it was hard to tell when the pain blinded your eyes. When I turned 16, a new kind of pain arrived. At first, it grew slowly, a heaviness in my chest, as if my flesh were expanding inward, filling spaces that would have been better left alone. After about half an hour of this heavy, full feeling in my chest, I told my parents, and they took me back to the hospital. By the time I arrived, I was already having trouble breathing. I tried to control the panic. At 16, I should have been used to my body's betrayal, but this time felt different. Upon arrival, I was greeted by Adam. While they connected me to all the usual machines, he joked with me, trying to ease my mind. "It's been a while since you dropped by to see us. I was starting to think you'd grown tired of us." I would have snorted if I had enough air. Still, I managed to let out a wheezing ha and replied, "Well, yeah, how could anyone disappoint Peter? He's still looking for a cure." I noticed a shadow cross Adam's face and asked, "What happened?" "Well, Peter hasn't come to the hospital for a few days. He's out on sick leave." His face told me there was more hidden behind that than he was willing to say. But I couldn't focus on questioning him. Every second, the air around me seemed to grow thinner, and I could barely draw in enough to stay conscious. Adam hooked me up to the oxygen sensor and frowned as he looked at the results. "You're barely getting any oxygen. We'll need a mask. How do you feel?" By this point, I could no longer answer. The air in my lungs was running out fast, and my head began to spin. The image before my eyes blurred at the edges, reminding me of the Polaroid photos my mother used to take, waving them so they would develop faster. In my imagination, I saw her in a memory almost lost forever, her fingers gripping the white edges of the photograph so as not to smudge the prints. In fact, this is my last memory before my eyes closed and my lungs stopped working. I had a dream. I was sitting before a full-length mirror with a gilded frame dressed in a slippery white silk that flowed over my fragile body, outlining my silhouette. A pair of green eyes stared back at me from the mirror. But the feeling washed over me again that they were not my eyes. I raised my right hand toward the mirror, letting my fingertips barely brush the cold glass. The girl in the mirror hesitated a moment before repeating my gesture. The glass warmed up. The instant her fingers touched mine, she leaned forward and opened her mouth. Her hot breath fogged the glass, hiding her face behind that veil. Her left hand began to trace a word on the mirror. A bit clumsy, a bit hesitant, it took me a few moments to decipher the word, because to me it was written backward. I concentrated and then looked at it in confusion. I looked back at her face, a face that should have been mine, but wasn't. Oh, she looked like me. Yes, the girl in the mirror had always looked like me, but she wasn't me, and only I knew it. Now, as I looked at her, I saw scratches on her face, dried black blood on her white skin. She was much paler than I was right now, and that thought frightened me, though I didn't know why. Dirt was tangled in her hair, as if she had been lying on the ground for a long time. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something. I saw she was missing several teeth. I never got to hear her voice. As soon as a slight rattle escaped her throat, the mirror shattered into 1,000 pieces. When I woke up, I was screaming. The nurses were scurrying around me in a frantic whirlwind, only adding to the panic that had consumed me. Adam was there, trying to calm me, trying to comfort me. But I was in such a state that it was impossible to reach me. I screamed, called for my parents, demanded they be brought to me. For the first time since early childhood, I fought like one possessed until they listened to me. Adam and the nurses muttered something among themselves, arguing while they let my parents in. I didn't give a damn. An urgent, consuming need ran through my veins, and it was impossible to resist it. My mother and father rushed to me, and I hoarsely uttered the word the other girl had written on the mirror, Maxine, and suddenly the world stopped in two ways at once. First, the doctor, the nurses, my mother, and my father all froze, as if struck by rigor mortis. They stared at me, mouths open in terror. A silence settled over the room, deeper than any I had ever felt before, as if we had dropped into some other level of reality. I suppose, in essence, we had, but I barely even noticed, because the other facet of the world stopped too. My muscles relaxed, my breathing became free. My body obeyed the commands it had always ignored. For the first time in my life, I felt no pain. Maxine is the girl in the mirror. It's no wonder my parents find it so hard to understand. They told me that in cases like ours, there are special bonds that must be taken into account. They simply couldn't see what I saw, because they didn't have those bonds. That day, my parents gave me answers. answers to questions I hadn't even suspected. They told me a story. It wasn't a happy story, and it's not like they were very skilled storytellers. But it was my story. I wasn't born alone. There were two of us, baby girls brought into the world by a C-section from my mother's tiny body the night after we were born. We lay together in the hospital nursery in identical pink onesies. By morning, one of us had disappeared. Finding out who had taken her proved impossible. The security cameras were turned off. There were too many fingerprints from the staff to determine the culprit, so it was lost in a labyrinth of hazy conjectures. While I was handed over to my parents, that's why we never suffered from debt, even though my hospital bills must have cost a fortune. The price of a monstrous mistake, I suppose. That's why the hospital staff always treated me with special kindness. The price of guilt. That's why the girl in the mirror never looked exactly like me. Maxine is the girl in the mirror. Maxine is my twin. Peter has disappeared. I suppose I should call him Dr. Lewis now, shouldn't I? But that title doesn't suit him. He stopped answering calls at the hospital. The police went looking for him. At first out of concern, and then out of fear. I suppose you could say they crave justice, but I know the truth. They are afraid of what he might do, of what he did. How do I know? I'm aware not because of my connections at the hospital, but because of what they found in his backyard. Whom did they find in his backyard? Can you guess? I don't know why they allowed me to see the body. I suppose my parents perhaps felt guilty. After all, they were hiding something very important from me. They kept Maxine's secret, pretending she had never existed. They wanted to protect me. I understand, and I think I can forgive them. They allowed me to take a look at the body. What I saw didn't catch me by surprise. Pale skin, an emaciated body, scrapes all over, and dirt in her hair. I noticed something else. The absence of fingernails, which had been torn off from clawing at the wood of the coffin, the bluish tint of her face from asphyxiation, the bruises on her body wherever she had beaten herself, fighting desperately for air and for life. I wasn't surprised, because it was her, the very same girl from the mirror, and I was with her when they buried her alive. Twins are, in general, a strange phenomenon, and although a multitude of studies have been conducted, understanding exactly how the connection between twins works is difficult. However, it is well known that twins share a stronger bond than normal siblings. For example, twins can sometimes guess what the other is thinking. Twins often choose similar partners. Sometimes, what one twin feels is also experienced by the other. For example, pain. The autopsy gave so many answers, though I'm not sure I wanted to know them. Her bones bore the marks of a multitude of fractures that never healed. Right, including a rather severe arm fracture, that very same one my mother thought I had broken when I was 10. She was missing several teeth, ripped out by the roots. Her entire back was covered in knife scars, wounds that opened up over and over again and never truly managed to heal. Her whole body was a continuous testament to the tortures she had endured during all these 16 years. I wonder if she knew there was another girl suffering right alongside her. Peter was never found. It is sickening to me now to know that he performed his sick experiments on us. It wasn't enough for him to satisfy his sadistic desires on Maxine's flesh. No, he needed to observe the reflection imprinted on me. The police took thousands of photos of his house. They told me there was a torture room there. They won't let me see those photos. I'm not sure I want to, either. I fear that one day I will see her in my dreams anyway and recognize her instantly. Now that my pain is gone, I suppose I should be happy. After so many years under the yoke of this torture, freedom brings an unspeakable relief, and Maxine, undoubtedly, is also free from those years of torment she she experienced in her flesh. And yet, there is something in me that misses it because, as I understood too late, it was the confirmation that Maxine was alive. What is better, I think? To know she is dead and no longer suffering, or if she were alive with the possibility of a rescue. Should I rejoice that she has found rest, or be saddened because she is dead? But what torments me the most is this. When I looked into the mirror, did she see me looking back at her too?